Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Seth Awards. I've got my special music club hat that I found in a thrift store on. And today I'm going to be starting off with the shortest of our videos and just talking about the Superlative Awards. So the Superlative Awards are going to be the most unique album, the most emotional album, the wettest album, and one more in here that I'm trying to remember because it's not on the sheet, the best title for an album. Tomorrow, I think I'm going to go through the genre awards. After that, I'm going to be going through my top 50 singles, followed by the best per person awards, in my opinion, and then finishing off with my top 50 albums of Music Club. So, let's get things kicked off with, let's keep it simple, okay? The Wettest Album. Nick obviously dominated this category. And, you know, a lot of Nick's stuff was very wet, but when I was initially coming up with the nominees for this album, it was really only three that stuck out in a huge way. And those were Luminous EP by Future Primitive, Slurp and Giggle by Opio, something like that, and Jettison Mind Hatch by Tipper. Now, all of these albums were fat and wet and squelchy and had that moisture that's so hard to describe in music, just that dampness all around them. And on listening through all three of them, I can tell you which one fell short, and that was Luminous. Luminous, certainly a wet album. Pretty damp, pretty moist, but between Slurp and Giggle and Jettison Mind Hatch, those albums are drenched. They are soaked. Going into this award, going into this nomination, I was looking at Slurp and Giggle, really. You know, with a title like that, with Slurp in the title, it certainly infers a wetness to it. And Slurp and Giggle absolutely is a very wet album. Extremely squelchy and squishy. Like a wet sponge, you know? And so that was definitely my front runner going in, but having listened to all of these albums back to back in exact comparison to them, I came to the conclusion that Jettison Mind Hatch is, for my money, the wettest album we've had in Music Club. I don't know. Just the instrumentation, even without it having Slurp or another wet sound in its title, it just was so fucking wet. It was damp as hell. It felt like swimming at the Marianas Trench, okay? It felt like liquid IV. You know, you can have just water, and that's plenty wet, but you get the liquid IV in there, now it's extra wet, extra hydrating. And yeah, Jettison Mind Hatch just all throughout, unbelievably wet. So, wettest album in third, Luminous EP. Second, we had Slurp and Giggle, and first, the wettest album, Jettison Mind Hatch by Tipper. Moving on, let's go to best title. So this is, just, like all of these, purely subjective. But this is just, the titles that I found the most interesting, the most engaging, the most, went the hardest, really. And so, at the bottom, I'll put it this way. I put in 5 albums here. So, at number 5, Traveling Without Moving by Jamiroquai. I like that title. I think that's a cool title. It's attention grabbing. It's memorable, and it even feels a little bit funky. So yeah, Traveling Without Moving. I like that. Number 4, got Scaring the Hose by JPEG Mafia and Danny Brown, and again, fun title, accurate title considering the artists and the type of hip hop that they produce. And yeah, just again, really memorable, really solid title. Number 3, we got Faith in Strangers by Andy Stott, which, it's, a bit cryptic, but it's very smooth. It's very, mysterious. And I liked that. I like it. It's another memorable title. Second place, we got Inside Every Fig is a Dead Wasp by Lunar Vacation, which, one, stuck with me. That's wild. That's a wild thing to say. But two, is apparently true to some extent. There is a certain species of wasp that only reproduces within a certain species of fig that grows in the Mediterranean. So for at least that species of fig, the wasp is a massive part of their pollination cycle. And so yes, there is in fact a dead wasp inside each of those figs. I love titles that are educational. So yeah, hell yeah, I liked that. And number one, my favorite title, Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. Just a really engaging title. I don't have as much to say about it as I do about Inside Every Fig is a Dead Wasp or Scaring the Hose, but it just sticks with you. It really does. And it's, I don't know, there's just something about it. There is an absolute je ne sais quoi about Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness that I can't get away from them. I do want to give one honorable mention here, though, and that's going to be A Grand Don't Come for Free. I liked it. It just did not make my top 5, and that's kind of what I'm restricting the scope of this video to. All right. Getting into the meat of it. Do I go with unique or emotional? Let's go with unique. We'll start with the most unique album. Now, I'm going to kick this off right off the bat. This and the most emotional are going to start with an honorable mention. For the most unique album, honorable mention absolutely goes to The Great Yellow River by Zhao Ziyong, I think. Something like that. In that, I'd never personally been exposed to traditional Chinese music, and this was very unlike my expectation for that. I was thinking something more Shen Yun, and, just really well performed and really engaging. Just super varied, a lot of energy throughout, and, I do not speak Mandarin Chinese, but the energy, I think, conveyed well. So, The Great Yellow River was a very unique listen. And just barely missed my top 5. I can't get my fucking hair to sit in this hat. I'm getting a haircut on Tuesday, so I won't have to worry about this soon. There we go. Okay. At number 5, fifth most unique album, in my opinion, is And by Arca. Throwing it way back to the first week of Music Club. Was an interpretation of pop electronic that I hadn't really heard done. And I was at least somewhat familiar with Arca. I'd heard music communities that I'm a part of talk about the Kicks series, and I, at some point, tried diving into the Kick series, and it was very wild. But this is definitely a less refined and less polished version of Arca. And, yeah, even though I listen to more industrial and more experimental sounds frequently, this was still separate and different from those sounds. And, yeah, I really appreciated it. I liked it, so stood out, was very memorable, and was quite unique. At number 4, we've got Kvitraven by Wardruna. And yeah, I thought this fucking ruled. Just like contemporary or contemporized Norse hymns. I guess hymn is the best word I can think of it. But super heavy, super atmospheric, super well performed, and yeah, just I am not Norse. I don't have a lot of familiarity with actual Norse things, but it definitely had an air of authenticity to it, at least an air of reverence that whether it's real or not, it was conveyed. And I really liked it. I loved the, authenticity of it being in Norse and how they tied that in with more modern sounds to really amplify that energy. It almost felt Swans-like, but, was certainly different and its own thing compared to Swans. So, yeah, Kvitdraven was super unique. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really cool. At number 3, third most unique album, we got Oil of Every Pearl's Uninsides by Sophie. And this is very similar to Arca. I'd heard about Sophie, knowing that she was doing experimental music within the pop genre, but I hadn't checked her out. And yeah, wow, she's doing a lot with pop. It's not quite hyper pop, so it's not, so easily defined into that genre. It's not really industrial pop either. It's something so incredibly its own thing. But despite that level of arbitration and experimentation within the genre, there are still some incredibly catchy moments in there. I almost feel like this has a kinship to Brat, in that Brat is far more accessible than this. But, I feel like spiritually they're related. Maybe not brother, sister, but second cousins. They could be second cousins. Sophie just did some incredible stuff with this album. And yeah, she had a vision and a talent that she achieved in a spectacular way. Ponyboy has absolutely stuck with me as a bit of a ridiculous song, but also just like brutally catchy and how pared down and sparse it is. But, that simplicity built on it and added to it. So yeah, Sophie, Oil of Every Pearl's Uninsides was like nothing I'd heard up to that point. Very, very unique, and I liked that. At number 2, we have Red Sky by Moonhooch, and this is a bit of a weird pick for me in that I have heard something like this before. But it's something that I'd only heard in one other place, and I wanted a lot more of. This album 100% reminded me of the instrumental songs off of Viagra Boys' first 2 albums. Very hard jazz, like not jazz punk, that's very much its own thing, but just hard jazz. Energy, excitement, stank. Such a stanky fucking album. This album fucking reeked, dude. But I loved it, and it, when I first got into Viagra Boys, I heard those instrumentals, and I was like, hell yeah, I want more of that. This is awesome, and I really like this. Then, getting into Red Sky, that's exactly what was delivered, and I was just so happy to hear, hey, someone has taken this idea, this sound, and really formed it into a full-blown project. And that made me really happy to hear. And yeah, absolutely delivered, and I loved it. I thought it was really awesome and still quite unique. Even though it sounds like Viagra Boys, that's not, when I'm going to tell someone about Viagra Boys, I'm not going to tell them about these songs. I'm going to tell them about like their regular songs. But this was its own thing and was a very cool thing at that. So, Red Sky. Now, number 1. This, mind you, is a bit of an honor, considering the type of music I listen to. To really, truly shock and surprise me, I feel like you got to try a bit hard. And I'm happy to say, Dom, you nailed it. Visions by Guilhem Desk was fucking insane and enlightening, my guy. The hurdy-gurdy shouldn't sound like that. The hurdy-gurdy should be a nimby-pamby, lame-ass instrument for autistic dorks. And this guy fucking shreds it. Oh my god, it felt like there were instrumental influences from electronic and rock and jazz, but it all maintained that traditional reverence for the instrument. You can tell he is a virtuoso and he is so passionate and so respectful of the hurdy-gurdy, but he is so willing to do shit with it and not just tread the beaten path. Like we had Distant Calls as well from you, Andrei Vinogradov, and is fine. You know, he does some nice things, but really it's almost incomparable to Visions, other than they're both playing the hurdy-gurdy. Gilhelm-Desk in Visions showed me no instrument is boring, truly. You just need to be creative enough to go ham on it. And he went fucking ham. He made a goddamn banging album that stands as, unlike anything I've ever heard, one of the most fun things I've ever heard, and is just consistently able to make me smile in both joy and awe. Phenomenal. Excellent, excellent album. All right, in our last superlative category for this video, the most emotional album. Starting things off with an honorable mention. You saw it coming. We're Giles Corey posting, okay? Giles Corey is an absolutely crushing album. Before going into music club, there were only 3 albums that I would listen to that could consistently make me cry. And those were In the Passing Light of Day by Pain of Salvation. Giles Corey is one of them, and A Crow Looked at Me. There were a few others that could make me tear up at points. Twin Fantasy has done that in the past, and Love, Fear, and the Time Machines made me do that in the past. But in terms of just always making me cry, it was Giles Corey, Crow Looked at Me, and In the Passing Light of Day. So, of course, Giles Corey is going to be an honorable mention. Only excluded from the list because I knew about it coming into music club, and I'm really wanting to celebrate things that were new to me. So, at number 5, we've got To Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar. And I get the hype. I do. His lyrics, his bars are so expertly crafted to convey a very powerful and very vivid story. I don't want to spoil. I'm not going to spoil, but this was phenomenal. I said as much in my review. Kendrick is unbelievably talented at writing a story and conveying it in a way that really engages me and really makes me care and makes me invested. And compared to his other work that we've listened to, or at least his other work I've listened to Pimp a Butterfly, I think, does it better than the other things I've listened to. And yeah, it's just a very powerful album. But it didn't make me cry. So it's at number 5. At number 4, we have Ethiops by Billy Woods, because everything I just said about Kendrick, I think Billy did better. I do. He delivers it a lot like slam poetry, it sounds like at times. And I feel like the more broken down delivery and the more broken down instrumentation adds a sense of unease that you can't get with Kendrick, because, there's nothing wrong with the way he's producing, but the way that Billy Woods is producing, that's not going to make it on the radio, I don't feel. That's not going to make it out to millions of listeners. And that's fine. I liked Billy's production and I liked his delivery. And I just felt like it made the sounds or the bars so much harder hitting. I'm not articulate in this review. But Ethiops, yeah, I just found it really engaging. A very cool delivery, a very cool story with, I feel like, perfectly produced sounds on top of it. I don't think it could have been more complimentary if it tried. And so Ethiops was even more powerful than To Pimp a Butterfly, so I had to put it above To Pimp a Butterfly. At number 3, we have Below the House by Planning for Burial, which is the closest thing to Death Consciousness and Giles Corey that I've heard that's not Death Consciousness or Giles Corey. Now, Death Consciousness has not made me cry. I feel like it has the capacity to make me cry, but it's certainly not as overtly depressing and upsetting as Giles Corey. And Below the House, I feel, is kind of the middle ground. It's still not as viscerally dark as Giles Corey is, but it's certainly a lot more subdued and depressed than Death Consciousness. So it really does strike that middle ground. A very dark album, a very sad album, a very, very melancholy album. And I really enjoyed it. I still liked it. I still think it falls short of Giles Corey and Death Consciousness, but those are both 10s for me, so falling short of those isn't really a sin. It was still very impactful. It was still very emotional. And I really, I got it. I get it still. I've revisited it both for this and just in casual listening. And yeah, I just feel like it lacks a bit of the visceral stuff that you'll get from Dan Barrett, but it's still a very dark, very compelling album. So I really enjoyed that. At number 2, I feel like this is the shock. This is the surprise here. It's Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness by Smashing Pumpkins. And I went into this album with really minimal expectations because I had heard, the hits. I'd heard 1979. I'd heard Bullet with Butterfly Wings. I did not really expect to go into I think just under, maybe just over 2-hour project that is crafted so meticulously and put together so well. And I feel I'm certainly not the grunge expert here, but I've listened to my fair share of Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, those guys. I listened to my fair share of it. And I just don't think any of them hit the level of angst that you get on Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. Because angst isn't just about rage and resentment and feeling, what's the word I'm looking for? Not disrespected. Disingenuous. No, that's not it either. I'm forgetting it. It's dis something, I think. Lost my train of thought. It's not just about feeling anger and upset and resentment. There's also self-doubt, self-consciousness, and pain and confusion and worry and beauty and discovery and joy. Angst is, I just think, being overwhelmed with emotion, being overwhelmed with multiple emotions that are often conflicting at the same time. Angst is just a product of cognitive dissonance, and no other grunge project I've heard has captured that as well as Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. And I thought it was expertly weaved and crafted as to never spend too much time in one feeling, never spend too much time in one groove, and truly explore a massive range of musical tastes and styles and emotions. And I think it did it excellently. Very phenomenal. At number 1, if you've been paying attention to my reviews, this should not be a surprise to you. But at number 1, it is Dom, once again, with Hospice by the Antlers, which became the 4th album to consistently make me cry. I've told my story about why this album affects me so much, but I'll reiterate in short. The album is a concept album talking about a man falling in love with a terminally ill woman who does not reciprocate that at all. And it's entirely an allegory for an abusive relationship. And while I did not share or suffer the same abuses that the protagonist of this story did, there are still elements of it, especially when it comes to emotional abuse and feelings of being trapped and helpless, that, I relate to and I still have memories of. And going through this album, the whole album is very emotional. It's very heart-wrenching and passionate and sad. But when I first listened to it, I got through the entire album acknowledging that and respecting it and engaging with it very strongly. But I didn't start crying until I think the song is Wake at the very end, where he starts repeating the words, don't ever let anyone tell you you deserve that. And that struck the chord with me very strongly, because that is also something that I remember Allie saying to me verbatim when we were dating in our early days. So Hospice very rapidly, very quickly, and very strongly became a very personal album for me, and I really love it. So Hospice by the Antlers is the most emotional album I've listened to in Music Club. Thanks, Windows, for that notification. All right, I will come back here tomorrow to go through the genre awards. I think that's what I said. Probably. I'll figure it out. Seth Awards, Music Club, hat,